William Marx Mandel, and to save you the trouble of bringing out any possible pseudonym as you did with the matter of Mr. Auerbach, I'd like to make clear that I am a Jew.
That you are what?
That I am a Jew.
So am I, and I don't see that that's an issue here.
Well, the Jew who works for McCarthy is thought of very ill by most of the Jewish people in the
country. Are you a member of the Communist Party?
My dear sir, I have never consulted with the Communist Party in any manner regarding the writing of the 4 books I have written.
Mr. Mandel, are you a member of the Communist Party?
I'm going to answer your question, sir, under my privilege in the Constitution, but I'm going to answer it in my own way. This is a book wording. You lack only the tinder to set fire to the books as Hitler did 20 years ago. And I am going to get that across to the American people.
We will have no more of that, Mr. Mandel. You will answer the question put to you, or where's the officer? Officer, Mr. Cohen is our chief counsel. He's entitled to normal courtesy. You will answer his questions.
Are you a member of the Communist Party?
I refuse to answer that question under my privilege in the Fifth Amendment not to be a witness against myself.
Have you ever engaged in sabotage against the United States?
I refuse to answer that question under my privilege in the Fifth Amendment not to be a witness against myself.
Do you honestly feel that if you were to tell us truthfully whether you engaged in sabotage against the United States, that might tend to incriminate you?
Mr. Mandel, you want to talk about some of your writings which are in use by the State Department Information Service today. Let's do that.
You brought up the question of your name. Normally that wouldn't be important. Have you ever gone under a different name?
I refuse to answer under my privilege in the Fifth Amendment not to testify against myself, and I want to point out that the right to use a pseudonym is a traditional privilege of writers. I have never written any book under any other name.
Did you have a different name which you used in Communist Party meetings?
The chairman apparently assumes the witness to be stupid. I refuse to answer that question under my privilege in the Fifth Amendment not to testify against myself.
You have established the fact that his books have been purchased by the information program and were used in some of our libraries.
They're currently in use in some of our libraries, Mr. Chairman. One is
the Soviet Far East and Central Asia.
Soviet Far East and Central Asia. Now, there's another one I'd like to ask Mr. Mandel about right now. Did you write something entitled Democratic Aspects of Soviet Government Today, which was published in the American Sociological Review in June 1944? You wrote that, did you not?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, excerpts from that are set forth in a book called Understanding the Russians, which is being used by the State Department Information Centers today. And I would like to read from page 29 of that.
May I interrupt at this point for the benefit of the other members of the committee who were not present at the executive session? This is the witness who's threatened that if he were exposed and lost his job, that he would attack the committee. I think the committee should know that. Not that we're concerned about it, one communist more or less attacking this committee, nothing to the committee.
Has he told what his job is?
What is your job, incidentally? What is your job as of today? Where do you work?
The members who were present yesterday at the executive session...
Where do you work?
You will get your answer.
You will answer where you work.
You will get exactly that answer,
Mr. Counsel, I'm going to have you removed unless you answer the questions. After you answer them, you can make any speeches you care to. Would you answer the question, where do you work today?
In that case, I will answer it first. I am employed as a copywriter by LW New York City. It was known to the members of the committee who were present yesterday, and everyone here now knows this, that my present employment has nothing whatever to do with the purposes of this committee. I asked the committee yesterday, in the spirit of fairness, which I doubted it had, not to place my job in jeopardy for that reason. One of the committee members, either the chairman or one of the gentlemen whom I do not recognize offhand, then indicated that I should be willing to pay the price for the activities in which I engage. That was an admission by the committee that has arrogated itself the right to exact punishment, although it is not a court of law and deprives one of due process of law. That punishment has ranged from fines, ranging from several $1,000s in the case of people dismissed, up to the fact that you, Senator McCarthy, murdered Major Raymond Kaplan by driving him to the point which he jumped under a truck. Although everybody knows about that thing, that there was nothing that could possibly have merited even the most unimportant punishment for that man. That was my reason.
May I say, Mr. Mandel, that when you refused to tell the committee whether you are engaged in espionage as of today and sabotage as of today, and you assure the committee that if you told the truth, it might incriminate you, I think your employers should know that. If any man is committing sabotage, espionage against his own country, that should be public information.
I make no admission of committing sabotage or espionage at any time or today.
Well, Mr. Mandel, when you say, if I told the truth, I might go to jail, that's in effect what you're saying.
No, sir. Mr. Kaplan left a letter published in the New York Times which said, I quote, "You see, when the
quoting
dog..."
the entire letter?
I am quoting certain paragraphs, and the rest I am perfectly willing to have...
Mr. Chairman, who's testifying?
Mr. Mandel, when counsel asks you a question, you will answer it.
I'm sorry, sir. I am not quoting the entire letter.
Chairman, I think we have already entered the entire letter as an exhibit. I think we ought to have the entire letter, or we ought to have nothing.
I'm sorry. I don't understand, Mr. Chairman. Am I or am I not permitted at this moment to continue to read what I started to read?
You're not entitled to read Kaplan's confession. We're not asking you about that.
Do you think today that the Communist Party is the organization of the most public-spirited and self-sacrificing citizens in the United States of America?
That statement was about the Soviet Union.
Do you believe that the Communist Party of the United States today is the organization of the most public-spirited and most self-sacrificing citizens?
If the First Amendment still obtained in American law, I would answer that question directly. Under the circumstances, I have to rely on my privilege under the Fifth Amendment, as I have stated earlier.
Do you think that the form of government in the Soviet Union is better than the form of government in this country today?
I think you gentlemen will be exceedingly interested. I'm sure you will all be very interested.
You'll answer the question.
I will answer it. Under Secretary of State, Walter Bedell Smith.
No. Could you tell us, do you think, you can answer that yes or no. Do you think...
I will answer it.
May we get an
yes
answer, Mr.
or no,
Chairman?
or otherwise, eventually, and you will get an answer.
Do we have to wait eventually until the witness wants to...
It's a simple question. You will answer it yes or no. And again, we've been giving you people a great deal of latitude. We'll continue. You can make any speech you want to after you've made your answer.
All right.
You will first make your answer.
Fine. In that case, I will answer again under the Fifth Amendment, although I am very reluctant to do so and would much prefer to state my honest opinion.
You are refusing to answer whether you think the communist form of government is superior to ours. Is that the question?
That was the question, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
refusing, and do you honestly feel that if you told us the truth in answer to that question, that might tend to incriminate you?
That is my understanding of certain laws now on the books.
Now, the next question is this. Do you believe the cause of the United States and the United Nations in Korea today is a just cause?
As I told the McCarran Committee last year, I think the job is to stop the war and get out. It will serve no purpose whatever to rehash things over which passions have raged for 2 years.
Mr. Mandel, you will first answer the question, then you can explain your answer. Question was, do you think
that the cause of the United States and the United Nations in Korea is a just cause?
I do not, and here, sir, is my explanation.
Very well.
In the New York Herald Tribune of November 1st, 1949, there's an interview with the Minister of the Armed Forces of South Korea, Mr. Sin. He said, I quote, "If we had our own way, we would, I am sure, have started up already, South Korea. But we had to wait until they, American government leaders, are ready. They keep telling us, quote within quote, no, wait, you are not ready, unquote. Mr. Sin continues, we are strong enough to march up and take Pyongyang, the northern capital, within a few days, unquote. The end of the story is, Mr. Sin came to Tokyo last week and saw General Douglas MacArthur and other high American military officials. Now, on June 5th, 1950, just 14 or 15 days before the outbreak of the war, apparently we were ready. General Roberts, chief of the U.S. military mission in Korea, said as follows in a press interview. I quote him.
There will be no more of that. If you want to insert a newspaper article in the record, it will be proceeded.
Fine, there it is.
Mr. Mandel, may I inquire? Your private views are your own, but I'm a little curious about this book. I would assume offhand that to do a book like the Soviet Far East and Central Asia, to do it authentically, you would have to have traveled some over there. Did you travel in that area?
I was in the Soviet Union. I was not in that area. Einstein was never inside the atom. He seems to be able to understand it.
Well, now, I didn't ask for any levity. I was asking a fair question because if a man writes and writes authentically on some subject, he either depends on second-hand sources in a library or he goes and interviews people on the ground.
Sir, I have lived all my life in this country, but for 1 year in Russia. I was born here. I do not think that I am as competent to write a book on the United States, and I've traveled widely in this country. I do not think that I am as competent to write a book on the United States as I am to write a book on Russia. Because to write a book about a country requires more than living in it, traveling in it, even if one has pretty good eyes. One has to study a country. One has to use all its scholarly and other resources. And I have had the privilege of utilizing one of the finest collections in this country, the collection of the Herbert Hoover Institute at Stanford University, which engaged me as a fellow on the basis of books I had previously written, including that book, which it deemed to merit my engagement as an expert on Russia. And I'd like to... Sir?
Did you go to the Lenin School here in Moscow?
I was 14 years of age when I went there. I went to Moscow State University and studied biochemistry.
No,
The question is, did you ever attend the Lenin School?
No, sir, I never attended the Lenin School. Don't even know where it is.
And what schools did you attend in Moscow?
I attended the Moscow State University and studied biochemistry. My records are on file with City College in New York.
For 1 year?
For somewhat less than 1 year.
Now, I noticed that in connection with your name on the title sheet, there's carried this legend, Research Associate, American-Russian Institute. Are you free in the committee what the American-Russian Institute is?
The American-Russian Institute is not. It was dissolved some years ago.
It doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
What was it when it did exist?
The American-Russian Institute, to the best of my knowledge and belief, and I worked for them, I think 3 years, was an organization devoted to gathering factual information on Russia, and an organization which went out of its way to avoid pressures from either side, including the left, to interpret factual data on Russia in a prejudicial manner.
Starting in 1947, Congress created an International Information Service. It embraces motion pictures, it embraces books and libraries, it embraces some $21 million of expenditure for the Voice of America. It has a very definite objective. The objective is to combat communism. If it were not for that, certainly Congress never would have approved such an outlay of funds. Now we discover that public funds are used to purchase books that have been authored by Mr. Browder, that have been authored by Mr. Allen, and books, unless there are more, that have been authored by you. The question is it an efficient outlay of public funds? When books, after you examine them, give you the clear impression, of course, that they do everything except set up the free ideal, as we understand it. You think that's a justifiable expenditure?
Sir, I dropped into my public library in New York several months ago to ask the librarian why one of my books, which I had given to that library, was not on the shelves. And the lady began by stating, other books were on the shelves. The lady began by stating that the book had not been properly processed downtown at the main library. And then I happened to notice, just where we were standing, a large group of books on Russia. And being well acquainted with the subject, it was quite obvious that these books, not on a shelf, but piled as though they were in process of being moved, were the type of books which I believe to be objective. And I might say they are books written by people, most of whom would gladly tell you that they were not and never were members of the Communist Party. And so I asked the lady, why are those books there? She said, well, they were written at an earlier time, during the war. And the library was in process of removing from the shelves those books which represented the honest opinions of Americans, including very prominent Americans, about Russia during the war. That, I contend, you will very possibly challenge this, that I contend represented a reflection of the book burnings, the witch hunts, of which I believe this hearing is a part. Now, in that connection, as far as your question relative to public funds are concerned, in the first place, I believe that the chief objective of this hearing is to get the rest of the books off the shelves here at home. That's my belief. I may be wrong. Answer your question directly. I'll answer it directly.
Well, let me interpose.
Sure.
I think your answer is completely at variance with the fact, and I wouldn't know of any fact that would substantiate an answer like that, frankly.
Fine, then the public will have to judge. Now, to answer your question directly. A previous witness, whom I had the privilege of hearing this morning, testified that he opposed the Voice of America program completely as part of the Cold War. I would express that also as my opinion, but I would go further and state that the Voice of America, or whichever the exact title is, I'm not up on those things as closely as you gentlemen are, whichever committee this is which purchased these books and used them, and by the way, I am not aware of having earned 1 penny from the purchase of those books by this committee, the Voice of America, in using those books, quite obviously wanted to transmit to other countries the idea that in America it is still possible to express more than one point of view. And from the Voice America and State Department viewpoint, that is rather slick propaganda. Frankly, I think it's untrue propaganda. It's untrue propaganda when I find my books taken off the shelves here at home, and the same books are used abroad to indicate that my books are available. But if I may offer the gratuitous opinion as to why this is done, that is why I think it is done.
Here is a document that was gotten out by a House committee, and it shows the American Russian Institute of Southern California at Los Angeles cited as communistic, and the authority for that is Attorney General Tom Clark's letter to the Loyalty Review Board released April 27, 1949. Now, on the title page of the book is an indication that you were a research associate for the American Russian Institute. Now, sitting up here, what would you make of that situation?
The listing of organizations by Tom Clark or whatever other Attorney General was a purely arbitrary matter, not conducted with an opportunity for these organizations to defend themselves, and I simply deny the validity of the whole business. I happen to have been working for the New York American Russian Institute. So the New York American Russian Institute made it its business never to express an opinion on matters of fact. It took no part in these deliberations.
Oh, now, my dear sir, I must say that it is cited by the Attorney General on April 27, 1949.
If it is, then I can merely add what I added before, that in my opinion, the entire idea of any branch of government arrogating to itself under law the right to describe organizations as organizations which American citizens may not belong to, essentially, is in violation of the provision of the Constitution which guarantees the right of freedom of assemblage. And that is my opinion.
Well, to wind it up, this proceeding, of course, addresses itself to a very basic thesis, and that is this. We do believe it's wrong to spend millions of dollars of public funds for an informational service and then have it include works by authors who address themselves with vigor to the communist ideal and put those in the hands of students and others in libraries all over the world as a part of the American case. You think that makes sense, as a matter of fact?
As far as it applies to me, sir, I should like to point out to you that the books of mine which you have do not address themselves with vigor to the communist ideal. The books of mine which you have are books in which I state facts as I believe them to be true, and in which I draw few, if any, conclusions. Certain of the other books before you may take on another character, but insofar as I am the witness, those books were written from the viewpoint of a scholar who at that time was held in rather high esteem by non-communist and non-left scholarly institutions.
Mr. Mandel, this pamphlet which you sent up to be part of your testimony, I noticed that you have detached the first page of it, so it comes to us in the form of an anonymous pamphlet. Would you care to tell us who published this?
The back page will tell you. The pamphlet is called Man Bites Dog, which is a newspaperman's phrase, and it was somebody's idea of how to describe my testimony before the McCarran Committee last year. It was published by a weekly magazine called The National Guardian.
The National Guardian?
That's correct, sir.
National Guardian is a communist magazine, is it?
I don't know that anybody has called it that, sir, in any official findings. Your opinion is something to which you are entitled.
Is it your testimony that it is not?
To the best of my knowledge and belief, the National Guardian is not a communist publication. I can illustrate that, for example. As far as I know, the communists would probably be strongly opposed to any favorable reference to the previous witness, Mr. Brower. And I read in the National Guardian recently a letter of his appealing for, I think it was financial aid to conduct his defense against one of the things that came up before, and many similar things. I remember also that to this...
Just a minute.
Sure.
You say you think it's not communist because they carry Earl Browder's works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't follow your reasoning. You said one of the reasons why you feel this is not a communist magazine is because it carried the works of Earl Browder.
I said it carried a letter from him asking for financial support in this kind of thing.
That would be excellent proof he's not communist.
Well, to me it would be.
Has the National Guardian been conducting quite a vigorous campaign in defense of the convicted Atom spies?
Who are you referring to?
Julius and Ethel Rosenberg.
I want to make that clear. Convicted what?
Atom spies.
You know your law, Mr. Cohn?
Well, I prosecuted the case, I think so.
Now, what were those people convicted of?
They were convicted of conspiracy to commit...
Exactly, and conspiracy is not espionage.
They were convicted of conspiracy to commit espionage and the delivery of atom secrets to representatives of the Soviet Union. Now, the question was, is the National Guardian today conducting a vigorous campaign asking for the release of the Rosenbergs?
The National Guardian, to the best of my knowledge and belief, and I am not an editor or a member of its staff.
Do you read it?
I read it. The National Guardian, to the best of my knowledge and belief, is conducting a vigorous campaign asking for executive clemency in that case on the grounds that scientists told those people that Greenglass, the stool pigeon, could not possibly have remembered the information that he said he remembered.
You say that their campaign is limited to a request for executive clemency.
Insofar as my memory serves me. I may be mistaken about that. That's my recollection.
Do you think that the Rosenbergs were guilty?
Unlike a great many people who are taking an active part in that campaign and who have read the transcript of the trial from beginning to end and who have drawn a conclusion they are not guilty, I, as a scholar, will not offer an opinion because I have not read the transcript from beginning to end. However, I do think that the offering of the death sentence in peacetime is unjustified, and I do think, to return to an earlier matter, that it is rather typical of the situation existing in this country that the first two people ever to get the death sentence in peacetime for this crime happen to be Jewish.
Let me ask you this.
Yes,
you say, to show that the National Guardian is not communist-dominated, the fact they published an appeal for funds by Earl Browder.
Yes, sir.
Was not the Daily Worker itself sympathetic to Earl Browder in articles published following his indictment for perjury?
I would not know.
Do you read the Daily Worker?
There, again, we have to return, although it is very unfortunate for a scholar to have to do this. I have got, under today's circumstances, to return to the Fifth Amendment and state that I refuse to answer that question under the provision of the Constitution which protects me against...
This is the second time that the witness has brought up the word Jewish. He tries, apparently, to hold himself out as a representative of the Jewish people.
No, sir.
Be quiet now till I finish.
I'm sorry.
I think he's not qualified to do that. I think the Jewish people is a great race of people. I do not think you represent them. I think you do them a great injustice when you come up here and try to inject into the scene the fact that you happen to be of that great race of people. Each race has its renegades.
It certainly does.
Each race has its traitors.
It certainly does.
But as a whole, we've gotten as much, if not more, help from outstanding Jewish people in this fight against communism than any other race. Let us have that clear.
You've probably gotten as much opposition from Jews as any other race. So we are even on that account, if not more so.
You were not asked what your race was. You came up and volunteered it belligerently. I do not care what race you belong to.
I doubt that, sir.
I think some of the Jewish people will be very much ashamed of the fact that you belong to their race.
A very small minority, sir.
You testified that you felt our cause in South Korea was unjust. Do you feel the cause of the Chinese communists and the North Koreans is a just cause?
Exactly as just as it would be for us to invade Mexico or Canada if they had come into those countries as we came into South Korea.
Do you feel that the cause of the Chinese communists is a just cause?
I feel it is, but I think the war should be ended where we are now with a complete exchange of all prisoners, because that is what the American people want at the present time.
Do you feel that the Russian communist system is superior to our system?
As I answered earlier, that is something I would be happy to give a candid answer to if I still felt the protection of the First Amendment of the Constitution. But since that no longer applies, I must reply that I will refuse to answer under the Fifth Amendment, which protects me against self-incrimination.
In other words, I understand your answer to be that you refuse to tell us whether you consider the Russian communist system superior to ours on the grounds that if you told us the truth, your answer might tend to incriminate you. Is that your answer?
On the grounds that the Smith Act, which I believe to be unconstitutional, might be used against me on that basis.
If that is your ground, you'll be ordered to answer.
In that case, I will answer that it might tend to incriminate me under the act I have mentioned, which provides for conspiracy to teach things of all things in the United States.
How about this pamphlet, printed, you say, by the National Guardian? You know any communists in that organization?
I know a number of the members of the staff, and I haven't the vaguest idea as to whether any of them are communists or not.
Suppose you were a member of this committee, and the jurisdiction is to examine into the efficacy of the expenditure of funds and the efficacy of the operation. Would you regard this as a very improper exploration if you were up here?
If I were a member of this committee, I would regard it most important to discover how Senator McCarthy saved $170,000 on a $15,000 salary.
If you put on a campaign against the committee, you will not put on the campaign within the committee room.
Poor Senator McCarthy. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. Okay.
I don't care to sit here and listen to his advice as to how the committee should be run. You may continue, if you care to. I would like to get an answer to this, because there's been criticism ventilated in the press, as everybody knows. Would you regard this as an improper activity on the part of the committee under the committee rule, the committee being charged with this responsibility?
To the degree that this committee must have a job of pressuring librarians to take books out of the files, I would say so.
How does that help us to deal with the responsibility with which we're charged?
That is your responsibility, sir.
Step down.